and right as we're here, like instead of here we go, Justin's like, there he went.
I try to make an entrance,
You could do the stair step.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm coming.
Oh, that was good. By the way, just so everyone knows, I have a hat on order for Justin. So, because the bedhead. I'm just trying to say we're here to help.
I'm trying to use the headphones to keep it down. There we go.
That's what I do. That's my secret. The mullet being pinned back by the headphones is just epic right now. So,
and actually, Justin earlier had mentioned, because like the hair is coming out of the front of my hat. He mentioned I have a front ponytail.
That's a thing. That's got to be a thing, surely.
If not, it is now.
Yeah,
I'm a trendsetter.
Oh well. So last
what an
week,
uneventful weekend, huh? Sorry.
Wow. Yeah.
I was bored. I don't know.
Wow.
Not too much going on. I'm sorry, Brett. Continue.
No. I was just gonna say, I was gonna skip the weekend and just go back to last week.
Last weekend was quite the month. I mean, it was.
Man, yeah, no doubt. Hey, Cube Jerome. Here we go. I always appreciate Sure and Steady, Cube Jerome. Ready to cheer us on. So last week we talked about ECR. We talked about, registries, storing things, storing artifacts, how important that is. We looked at various features of ECR and all that kind of thing. And we looked at envelope encryption for security. We looked at
image scanning.
Image scanning. Thank you. Drawing a blank. And then we got into I think caching to be able to have upstream artifacts still be local, so that you can improve your pull speed and other benefits. So yeah, we looked at all kinds of good stuff with ECR, and Justin wanted to just kind of keep that going. And instead of ECR, let's broaden the topic to just registries, which I guess I did on Thursday, talking about caching. And let's just keep looking at registries and what options do you have, and what's out there, and what what benefits might they have. So yeah, what are we going to look at, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different options. I mean, the Docker registry exists. It's a container. I keep going blurry, and I don't know why my camera's losing focus. My camera's a little tired for Monday.
That's right. We're all losing focus, for sure.
It's like, stop moving so much, all right? But yeah, so there's a couple different options for registries. There's some paid options. There's some free options. Today, I want to look at Harbor, which is a CNCF project, which is a registry you can run yourself. You can run it on-prem. You can run it locally. You can run it in AWS, whatever you need. It has some features that some other of the free registries maybe don't have, just because it has a little more advanced usage intended for enterprise, where it has single sign-on and some sort of user management that sometimes you don't get. Sometimes it's just like, hey, if you can get to the endpoint, you can push and pull images, which is fine for some environments, but maybe not others. So I just want to kind of dive into Harbor a little bit and just show a couple of the features off and what it kind of takes a little bit to run it locally. So that was really the idea.
Awesome.
I was just going to ask, maybe can we just start with, Justin, what are some use cases, or why would I look to maybe hosting my own registry? Like, why would I go down that path as opposed to maybe just using like ECR, for example?
So if you have hybrid environments, it helps a lot. I've run a couple different environments that had on-prem and hooking up local development to directly pull from ECR without IAM credentials on my local machine or servers on-prem. Sometimes, it's easier, or you have some other authentication method on-prem, whether that's IP-based or subnets or something like that. You can allow you to get access to some of those resources on-prem, whether that's through a cache or just internal images. Other times it's a little more fine-grained control over, like, I have, my user access control is set up in LDAP, not in IAM permissions. And so I need to control how users access this stuff internally, how developers are pushing and pulling. And then also, as you mentioned earlier, your own requirements around either security scanning or caching, especially if you're doing it for an on-prem environment. If you have multiple data centers, doing those caches, whether as a pull through or on like a cron job, so like, hey, sync all these images locally, can save a lot of time, especially if you have hundreds of servers pulling from upstream registries. I mean, Brett, you were showing off on Thursday, just like, hey, I saved a second or something like that. And then you multiply that by, if you actually have, I don't know if anyone else has done this. I have taken down our like internet, like our data center pipe by pulling down, downloading stuff from all of the servers at once. And so if you tell all the servers, hey, go fetch that image, you can saturate pipes. And so if you can have a local cache and pull that over the LAN, you're not going to take down the internet for everyone, which I don't recommend doing and has happened for sure in my lifetime.
Yes, that can have cascading effects out there, by the way. Yeah. So definitely avoid that if you can. And so go ahead.
And I was just going to point out, like, one of the nice things about Harbor is it's kind of designed in this sort of Kubernetes space where one of the ways to install it is you have to install it in Kubernetes, right? Like, I don't need another box, another server, either EC2 instance or physical box to actually, I need to, Snowflake install, something over there. It's no, Harbor is packaged as containers. They have a Helm chart. So we'll go through some of those install steps too.
Nice. So you mentioned it was a CNCF project. Can we like back up a step and just describe what is a CNCF project and why is that important?
Yeah, so the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is the organization or the foundation that houses a lot of these projects. Kubernetes is one of the big ones, obviously. And
I've heard of it.
It was the first, project in the CNCF. And so that was a project that was donated from Google, so that a lot of it is so that it can be jointly controlled by a foundation that is neutral. If I'm a startup and I create a really cool tool and then I decide, hey, I want to close source this in the future, or I want to remove access from everyone else, or no one else has a say in what new features get into it. It's not great for an open source community aspect of being able to drive some of that. So a lot of the benefits people claim with the CNCF is it allows for open governance because it is a neutral body. I know some companies have legal issues with contributing code to probably a project that's owned by a competitor. So if if I work at a startup and my competitor has a similar project, like, hey, I have a bug fix that I need to run, I may not legally be allowed to contribute code to that, even if it is open source. So having a neutral home for a lot of these projects alleviates a lot of the legal overhead, but then also has some standardization around how often they get updated, how mature they are, just kind of a level set around, hey, if a CNCF sandbox project is a playground, it's not necessarily a full production sort of thing. You can run it in production probably, but they're not really giving those sort of guarantees around long-term supports and longevity, and also funds and infrastructure costs. All that stuff with Kubernetes, like testing infrastructure, actually costs a lot of money. Hosting all of the images that people pull, I know like the Kubernetes pause container must have been pulled, 1 billion times by now. I have no idea,
wow.
But it's just like it's the basis for pretty much every pod if you're running Docker. And could you imagine if like a startup was like hosting that and like their egress costs out of for some, even if it's a small container, like pull it 1 billion times, like, oh hey, guess what? Like this adds up. So CNCF adds funding and infrastructure for those projects, and a lot of popular ones like Helm and Kubernetes and Envoy, and these are projects that have been donated to the CNCF, and then all of the not copyright, the other one, maybe it's trademark. All the trademark lands in the CNCF. So again, it's a neutral body so that you can guarantee, or at least have the same guarantees around what licenses are there, how you contribute to things. That all just becomes part of a CNCF project. So those are the benefits of using CNCF projects versus my startup, whatever cool registry. If I go out of business, or if I decide to close source it in the future, those are risks that you take by doing it from someone that is just doing it on their own, or a company or something.
And so if it is a CNCF project, that doesn't mean that there's not a company backing it still, and there's not a path to be able to get support or anything like that, right? It's not you're left completely alone, are you?
So one of the requirements for graduation of CNCF projects, I don't remember the names of the levels right now, but from going to sandbox to the next level is multi-company contributions. So it can't just be all driven by, a single developer at a single company that says like, oh, I'm doing all the work and I'm going to get burnt out or whatever. So they do require some of those baseline things for graduation. So if you see a graduated project, you can assume that it has regular releases, it has a pretty established community and contributions, so that those all exist. But there's nothing that stops someone from taking one of those projects and running it as a hosted service like EKS, right? We could take Kubernetes from upstream and we can run it as a service for people to use. And so there's nothing in the CNCF that gives you support or a paid contract for something. You will have to look at vendors, which is, I know was posted here for the landscape. The landscape is a mix of projects and also services. So some of them are just open source, you can run it yourself. Some of them also have, let me go pay someone and they can, like Quay registry, right? I can pay for Quay. It's a service, but I also can run the open source bits if I wanted to. And it's up to you on who you want to partner with.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That's pretty cool, actually. So I guess, is it possible in Harbor's case specifically, can you, like contact Harbor and get support from them?
I don't remember for sure. They do actually have a demo sites that is available at demo.goharbor.io. So I can throw that in the Slack real fast. So if you want to play around with it, they have here's an instance that you can just come and run, play with, and we can, you can mess around with it. You can create some things and you'll have a user that you register with. So
nice.
So that's an option if you just want to play with it without running it and see what it's like. I do know some vendors offer Harbor as part of their kind of stack of saying like, hey, if you're going to run Kubernetes on-prem or run it yourself, Harbor is through the vendor a supported piece. I don't know. Actually, I can't remember what company originally started Harbor. But I know like other companies have run with it and said like, okay, we're going to include Harbor for our distributions. I remember Pivotal PKS came with Harbor. Yeah. If you're running it on-prem, I know most of the, I'm trying to remember if like a lot of the Red Hat stuff was Quay because of CoreOS, but I'm trying to remember. I think Heptio was doing Harbor for their on-prem stuff too. So it really depends on your vendor, but you'll probably get support for some registry, and a lot of them are standardizing on a couple of them that are open source, whether that's Quay or Harbor. The Docker registry, the open source one, is pretty bare bones. I mean, there's no authentication, there's no user management. There is caching, as you showed, but right. it's pretty bare as far as that's concerned. So these other projects add on to that.
Nice. So a couple of comments have come in. Texan Raj says, love harbor.io. So that's cool. Go harbor.io though. I don't know what harbor.io is. But another question, James freaking Carr says, will AWS host something like Go Harbor in the future? And I'll take a stab at answering that. The future is the future. There's no telling. However, what we do a lot of is listen to our customers. So if there's something that you want like that, perhaps, definitely reach out to us, open an issue on the containers roadmap, or talk to your TAM or solution architect or something like that. Let them know your interest and your use case, like what specifically are you looking for, and we'll throw it into the mix, I guess, and consider it. And then Cube Jerome says, does ECR use Harbor behind the scene? No, but without commenting on what we do use, we've built a purpose-built registry. But there are plenty of other examples throughout AWS where we might have an offering that does something that's very similar to another offering that is of the open source flavor. So we don't do that today with Harbor, but like I said, who knows what the future holds.
And I mean, yeah, to your point of earlier, like right now we have ECR, and ECR is how you can run containers and host them in AWS. And there, you use the AWS console to kind of see those as well as through the command line. So that's the current AWS implementation for registries. And as you're, all last week you were covering it, but
Yeah.
if people want to host containers close to their compute inside of AWS, like that's the way to go.
Yep. Nice. James says, cool, Docker image caching is so important. ECR misses that feature so much. And then Texan Raj, I think he's like teeing you up. He said, can you guys walk us through setting up Harbor on EKS? I had issues with ingress on Harbor Helm install.
I agree. I had some issues.
Oh, good.
I will throw that out there. You are not alone. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I did.
Maybe...
I just posted in the chat too the projects. I misspoke. Harbor is a graduated project. It's not a sandbox. I remember when it was first coming in as a sandbox, and for some reason in my mind, remember seeing it being in. It was called incubation or sandbox at the time. Whatever it was, is like, hey, we want this project to be part of CNCF, but it's come a long way to be a graduated project now. So it's up there with mature projects that have the release cycles that we're talking about and multi-company contributions.
So let's do it, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got a terminal up here. If you switch to
bingo.
There we go. So to the point about the ingress support with Harbor, there's two. I'm running it in kind right now. So if I let's say kind get this. Oh, it's called kind, of course. If you're not familiar with kind is a way to run Kubernetes locally inside of Docker containers. So it runs some containers, and I basically get all of Kubernetes, but I run it locally on my laptop. So if I K is my alias for kube control, get nodes, I can see that oh no, did I make the wrong? What happened? I may have to tear this down because I think I lost my. Wait a minute.
Are you on the right machine?
I hope so. Well, yeah, I still have ingress running. Okay, what's happened? I had another worker node. I don't know what happened. We'll see if this goes well. But to the point earlier, I definitely had some ingress problems. So there's two pieces. One, for me, running in kind, I had to do some special things for exposing ingress. And so if I get pods, do I still have them running? Yeah, so I can curl. Okay, so my ingress is still running, just to make sure. But there are some steps that are different for kind with ingress than a standard cluster, whether that's in EKS or somewhere else. So you want to go through the kind documentation on installing an ingress controller first of all, and just for where did I put that? Look at that! I remembered. This is amazing. It's Monday and I'm just proud of myself. So here's my kind config, which again I stole this from the install docs. It wasn't something that I created. I went through kind. I went through the install docs. This is basically going to have. Oh, I forgot that my select in the browser terminal is funky. But I have a role here with some config, and this is going to say that one of my nodes is going to get this ingress ready true, which is telling, because it's running in Docker, you have to expose the ports a certain way. So you can only have one of them. So it's just a little funky running it locally. But basically, I'm going to run expose port 80 and 443, which runs through into the ingress controller inside of kind. And so
I hate to interrupt, but can you explain just something kind specific? Texan Raj asks, no worker nodes on kind?
I thought I had worker nodes. That's what I'm confused, because I destroyed this cluster and recreated it like 3 times this morning. If I I think, is this going to say? Okay, yeah. So this third time that I created this kind cluster, I didn't create a worker node. It's running just one node. It's also the control plane. It's a single node Kubernetes cluster, which is why
that makes more sense. Yeah, and WShari also says the master is a worker. So
yeah. So yeah, if you're looking here, this is my one container, which is my node, and you can see I have port 443. 80 and going into 6443, which is the Kubernetes API. So the ingress controller and the Kubernetes API are all running in this one container, essentially. So yeah, and then if I look at Let's look at all my pods. You can see I had this as an example app that I was testing my Ingress controller because it was part of their deployments. And then I have the actual Ingress controller running here, and then Core DNS, etcd, Kube API, controller manager, proxy. Those are the things you normally would see on a Kubernetes control plane node, and then some of it on the worker nodes.
Makes sense.
So I have enough of Kubernetes to run other things.
And I don't know if you'll have time to get to this, but maybe at the end, if you can just speak about it. Yesin says, I use Harbor. It's awesome, but I can't enable SSL on Nginx for it. So maybe we could backlog that question.
That gets into the actual install of Harbor. If we look at the docs, they have a couple different ways that you can install it. There's, like I said here, they have a demo server, which you can just go play with it if you just want to see what you can do. It's not an admin interface, so you can't do a lot of the configuration that you might want to, but you can kind of get a sense of what's there. As a registry, I mean, most registries are pretty, they're hosting artifacts. And so it's, there's an artifact, I can pull the artifact. They're usually pretty basic. But the actual install, they have some steps on running it locally in Docker Compose. It didn't work for me this morning, which is why I switched to Kind. I had a couple different issues with the actual Compose file. And so I just said, well, I actually know Kubernetes better than Docker Compose. So I switched to that. But I would, if you want to look at it in Docker Compose, that's an option too. And so the quick install, they have a script that will basically is supposed to do the Docker Compose settings. Instead of doing that, there's also a Helm chart. And so, which is what I was doing. It tells you some prerequisites. You need, Kubernetes cluster. I need Helm installed, and I need an Ingress controller, which is essentially what I got now. And then I don't need Postgres. I don't need Redis because I'm just running this locally. So for me, if I delete the cluster, all of my images are gone. That's fine. That's in a demo environment. That's what I would expect. So, but this gets you some of the what the load balancer looks like, and then how to actually do the install. So you basically need to add a Helm repo, which has the chart available, and then you can look at the components here, or you can just actually run an install. So I'm going to start that because it actually takes a little while. So I already have the registry, which is this Harbor. Harbor is the namespace, and Harbor is the project, and I'm calling it Harbor. So it's like Helm install Harbor. This is what we're going to do, but it's okay. So this will actually pull down that chart, like I said, and basically create locally the manifests that I need, and then shove them all into Kubernetes. And so
it's like a magic incantation,
right? And here's the Helm chart README, and I am using Harbor 3, so I don't have or Helm 3, but which doesn't have a tiller component. So if you're using an old version of Helm, make sure you might need different docs for that. So using Helm 3 is good. But this is, again, the Harbor has their own Harbor Helm repo, which goes through the installation of Harbor. I'm just accepting all the defaults. You can use a set flag, and it gives you different options on how you expose that. In my environment, again, for Kind, I'm using Ingress. If you have actual physical worker nodes, you can use a node port, or if you don't want to expose it, you can use cluster IP. These are both options. If you're in a cloud, load balancer works as a service, but you can basically set how you want to expose that. And to the question about SSL, they have some of that documentation here in the chart repo about how to actually install it with different options. So there's all these configuration types of, do you want TLS enabled or not? If it is enabled, where are you pulling a cert from? So if you have a cert at your company, you might need to get that cert and have it locally, or be able to put it into Kubernetes, as well as what the common name, which is the URL you're going to use when you try to access Harbor. So these are all things specifically with using TLS in a more production-like environment that you want to consider. Locally, it's going to be a self-signed cert. I'm just going to accept it. It's no big deal for me. I also, by default, they have, what's it called?
Let's Encrypt?
Or no, it's a self-signed by default, but they provide a default domain here called coreharbor.domain, which is the domain for my registry. And so I go through and I actually add that into So I'm just routing that to localhost. So I can say, hey, I can type in my browser core harbor domain, and it's going to work. If that's not there, your ingress isn't going to work, because ingress requires those host names. Because if I just go to localhost by itself, Nginx will give me an error. It's like I don't know what localhost is. So you actually need to that sample I had before. I have ingress rules based on path, so I can say foo, and ingress knows, oh, hey, foo is the service that I'm replying from. So that's how ingress looks at those names that you're providing it, and then it routes it properly.
Nice.
My kind config. That's already actually in the kind docs, so I don't need to post that config. Kind ingress. If you go into the kind config, this is literally the one that I just copy and pasted and use. So I don't,
Awesome.
use that one because it might change. I did find some old ones that kind moves so fast that the API version changed, and so I was getting errors. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And then some of them don't have the node labels, which are required for this deployment. But this document is great because it walks you through if you want to use Ambassador, Contour, or Nginx ingress. Some of them have special flags like where to put the ingress controller based on node labels. So use the ones from here if you're using ingress with kind. But this walks you through, copy paste how you can deploy it yourself.
Awesome.
So
we're gonna keep sending your questions, Twitch and YouTube. We're gonna move forward, but let's queue up some questions and then we'll address them again in a couple more minutes.
So it looks like my registry is running. Just getting the pods. I put it in the default namespace, but all the pods here are running. And I forgot, because I did run it a couple times already, it's cached, so it's a lot better or a lot faster. But you can see some of the basics that it's going to run. Chart Museum is for actually store Helm charts inside a Harbor. Claire is CVE scanning for containers. Core is the actual main piece of the Harbor. And then I got database. I have a job service because you can run scheduled jobs. Notary for signing, which has a couple different things. So and then Redis and in the actual registry pieces. So this is all running, and I can inspect a little bit more with my ingress. You can see I have the core Harbor domain here, which, like I said, I had to put that in my host file so I could actually route to it, and then the notary endpoint as well. So we can get to that. Core Harbor domain. It's again self-signed cert.
Right.
Nginx by default is going to reroute me to the HTTPS endpoint, which is why I get the error. It says, "Hey, I don't know the cert." And if you actually inspect it, you'll see it's going to be self-signed somewhere in here by the Harbor CA. So it's not a trusted cert. You can download it and trust it, but if you're in a production environment, I actually recommend just getting a cert and doing it right, or using something like Let's Encrypt.
Yeah.
Default interface right here. Admin user is there by default in the Helm install. You can customize that through settings. Same with the password. The password is Harbor 12345. Capital H. So, look, it actually pulled. Oh, that's interesting. It didn't delete my storage from the last time I installed it. So I actually still have. I still have registries and projects in here. Okay, well,
that's kind of neat. I mean, it's don't count on it. It's not on
because
purpose.
I didn't delete the cluster. It saved the volumes, which are local hosts, so it's like it's on my computer anyway. But if I delete the cluster, obviously it goes away. I am just going to delete them now. We'll go through it. Oh, if they contain registries, I can't delete them. Okay, well, we'll show you some other things first, and we'll go through. So I created a user here, username Rothgar, made it an admin. We can create whatever users we want here for Brent at whatever. They do also have options for email servers and things if you actually want to get notifications. Brent.
You can definitely email me at brent@whatever.com, by the way.
And then they don't match. Come on. However. Oh yeah, if we want to make a user, one thing to notice if you are deploying Harbor in a production environment, there, like I said, there are SSO options. If you create a local user, you can't switch it to a single sign-on. So once you create the user, it keeps a local database. So you have to basically do a reinstall of Harbor. So make sure you have that set up in your config the first time if you want to do this. I did get burned by that in a previous job when I was running it. So it's great for local testing and especially local Docker command line, authentication. But if you're using single sign-on or something, note that in the future. So that's basics. I have a user. If I go over to my command line, I can Docker login. What's it called? I had already logged in, but this is my Rothgar user is logged into this registry now, so I can push and pull images as soon as I get projects available. Of course, where'd it go? There's my. Let's move that over. So we'll look at the projects real fast. The first one I set up was one for myself. Nope, that's not the first one I wanted to show. I'll show the one for me because that's the simplest use case, where me is a standard project as far as like it encapsulates registry or repositories. Repositories are where you store your images.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, I have a me/Ubuntu image, which I was pushing locally. Let's see, Docker. What do I have locally? Oh my gosh, I need to not do that. Hold on. That's better. Okay, I can at least see some things here. Let's push the S3 app controller.
Oh yeah, let's.
So let's just throw it in there. Docker tag AWS S3. What was it called?
Controller. Wait, ACK was in there, wasn't it?
It was ACK, wasn't it? ACK S3 controller. Okay. Docker tag ACK S3 controller. And then we're going to use, just like any registry, core.harbor domain / me is the project namespace, and ACK S3 controller. And this will, did I spell it wrong? Let's go simple.
Controller.
Yeah, it didn't work. There you go. Nginx.
Good old Nginx. Don't have to worry about. I know how to spell that.
My favorite demo image.
It's one of the top pulled images, but you always have to wonder, is that from production use or is that from demos? Because like demos just always.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a small image. It gives you a web server. It's great. So Docker push, Harbor will allow me to create a repository on push. So I don't need to pre-make the actual repository. I make the project first, and then doing a push is going to push those layers in. As soon as it's there, I should see over here. Go.
It's pretty slow for localhost.
It is. That's kind of curious.
I mean, probably
slow. Should have done it on Cloud9.
Slow disk, something like that.
Okay, so now we can see I have this Nginx image that came in. And if I look at it, one of the cool things automatically is we get Clear scanning out of the box. So I didn't configure anything for that. It just ran by default with the Helm chart install. And so it's doing a scan right now for vulnerabilities on whatever version of this. I don't actually know what version it was. But we can see, just some basics about it as far as which tags are here, the architecture, because you can't have multiple architectures if you want ARM or something else. And then down here, oh look, there's a high critical CVE on it. Some clear information, as well as like you can expand these to actually get like what the actual I don't remember CVE numbers. I'm sorry. And so having the description right there is like, oh cool, I can either look up that CVE. Get links directly to like what more information about it, or look at the actual description of what it's doing, why it's important. So
So Cube Jerome says maybe it was the latest tag not existing for the
Oh, you're
ACK
probably
S3
right.
controller.
Good point, because
Yeah.
when I was doing the builds, I used it with make and it had a Git tag on it. So yeah, I'm sure you're right.
And then W. Shari asks, Docker images G, is that some sort of an alias?
Yes.
We need a show. We need a show by Rothgar on just his aliases and setup.
I should.
That was grep, I assume, right?
Yeah. So is it?
Which? Oh, you do wins. I do which.
ZSH has a different. I'm trying to remember. There's a way to show what the alias is.
Aliases.
I bet that will.
Wow.
All right.
I use Zeesh, but I don't know. Maybe I just am failing at this.
I'll also just show you here. So I have. Can I not search? Oh my gosh. I'm really not liking this. I have a bunch of different aliases, and of course it's not in here. It's not in that file. But you can have ZSH has global aliases, which are different than Bash, which allow you to add an alias anywhere in your command line. By default, aliases are only at the front of the command. So if I do alias
that's
G equals grep, it only works if capital G is the front character on my command. But ZSH, you can do G for a global alias. And so what I actually do is, I have a global alias for that. And so G will always pipe grep. I also have it for less. So I have like a capital L is pipe less. I have a head, capital H. So like capital letters for me are always like that, like combined pipe with command. And I have a capital C, which will copy to clipboard. So anytime I want to pipe something to my clipboard, I just add a capital C at the end. So ZSH has a really cool option for that. They also have suffixes for aliases. So you could add like, if you always type something and you want it to like have a prepend something, you can have some character that'll type it up. So it's like ZSH is a lot more flexible with some of those aliases that Bash doesn't have. I think Fish offers it, but I haven't used Fish enough to remember. So
I tried Fish and couldn't make the switch. It wouldn't stick for me. But I'm with you, W. Shari. Today I learned Zeesh global aliases. I actually that's news to me. Texan Raj is excited about Trivy being the default, so that's really cool. Can you tell us what? Go ahead.
No, I can't. I've never used it, and so that was actually one thing that I did not get a chance to look into. But I wanted to learn more. So for sure, if someone has any other information, let me know.
And James freaking Carr, apparently, we timed this just right. He's gearing up to set up Artifactory, which he used 10 years ago, and I mean, when it comes to storing artifacts, Artifactory is great for that. But it tries to be a general artifact store and be good at storing every kind of artifact there is. But Docker containers are a little bit different. There's layers, there's manifests, there's some things that you might want out of your registry that I think a purpose-built registry is going to be able to do just a little bit better. Maybe not. I don't know. It's certainly worth investigating, though. And that's all we're doing here is we're exploring.
Right. And if you need artifacts, like you're going to need, like I need to host something else, Artifactories are, a great option. But if it is just containers and Helm charts or OCI images of whatever that is, Harbor supports Helm charts, OCI containers, Docker containers, as well as CNAB bundles, which are an OCI spec for like multiple containers combined together, which is also helpful.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. I didn't mean to interrupt your demo.
No. So that was, showing off a registry. They should all just work pretty much the same. I can see, I can push and pull. Even if let's go back to that. I guess the pull is same thing. Actually, I'll do everyone too, which was the first image that I had in there. I already had it locally, but all that stuff just sort of works. And then you can also in the registry itself or in the project, I can add it to be public for anyone that can access this endpoint can pull them, which is helpful if not everyone needs to authenticate to, if you don't need to set up all your Kubernetes worker nodes with authentication credentials, you can just say, oh, it's public, if you can get to the endpoint, you can pull this anything from this project, which is very handy in some cases. And for the project settings, there's a lot of other stuff here as far as like user management, admins work. You can also have groups, which by default, they have admin can push and pull, developers can push and pull, but then there are just like standard users who can only pull, no push. So there's varying degrees of what you can do inside of Harbor, which you can't typically do with the open source Docker registry. You can obviously with Docker Hub has features like that. So if you're paying for some of the other features, and ECR ties in with IAM. So, but like I said, here's Helm charts. You can add, a bunch of other things like labels, and if you want the CVE scanner or the Claire scanner to be part of it. Well, see, this does say this is the Trivy scanner. So now I'm curious why. Oh, so Trivy is doing it by default, not Claire.
Okay.
Look at that.
Yeah, that was what Tex and Raj was
There you
saying.
go.
But it's still running Claire.
It's nice. It's still running the Claire endpoint because it's an option inside of the configuration, and that's at a per project basis. So I can disable scanning, or I can say run Claire or Trivy, depending on what you want. And then projects, sometimes it's hard with things like robot accounts for CI/CD, or you can get tokens to do your pushes and pulls without needing the full login, the full Docker clients, as well as webhooks from CI/CD. So when I get push, I can have some sort of webhook that comes over here and does an action based on the image. So lots of handy things based on those projects. The other feature I was going to show was what you did basically on Thursday with pull-through images.
Yeah.
Pull-through images or pull-through caching is a setting on the project itself. What you have to do first is you actually set up your registries, which are external registries to Harbor. Which is very handy. I set up one for Docker Hub. It's pretty straightforward. You just say which provider you want. So we could say if we want AWS ECR, and then you add a name for it, the endpoint that you want to use, what region, and then some access credentials. And so you could mirror all of your ECR images into Harbor or pull through cache. Yes, I want to cancel. So I was doing it with Docker Hub. It's just an example here, but we can say we want a registry. In my projects here, I told this Rothgar, because my Docker Hub user is Rothgar as well. I told it in the configuration that I wanted it to, I did it during, I don't remember where that was. I saw it when I first created the project, but now I'm not seeing it. We can say it's public. Oh, we can say proxy cache here. And then we can say which registry we want to cache as a pull through. So I could do another one like foo. Creates a brand new project that's going to be a pull through cache. We can see on here, I don't have anything right now. I have a public image called MPSYT, which is from an open source project. It plays YouTube music in your terminal. But essentially you can do the same thing where if I pull that image, I'm going to use, without setting up anything, I'm not pushing an image directly to Harbor. I'm just going to pull it down like I normally would from where I would get it in Docker Hub. So for me, it's under Rothgar MPSYT, which is right here. And so the only thing I have to do is pull it, and it automatically will go through Harbor. Harbor will go fetch it from Docker Hub and cache it locally.
Nice.
And so I think it took a little while to show up the first time for me here. But you can see in my other one, the Rothgar one I had, it automatically added it as a repo that I can, or a registry that I can take. That one has a lot of CVEs because I haven't pushed it for a long time. Please don't run that.
That's right. Yeah, it looks like that would set off some alarms. It's actually a great test of the scanner. Right. One subtle difference I notice is with Thursday, what we had to do was we actually had to modify the Docker client and tell it go use this this endpoint as a proxy, and instead what you did was you changed the image the image name that you were pulling, and you actually reference the proxy in your image. So that, in a way, that's a little bit easier to do, because you could keep your manifests updated, your deployments updated with the proxy location, and then have it always pull through, and you don't have to figure out how do I go update the Docker daemon or whatever
Right.
you're using to
You're
figure out.
either making it transparent on the configuration of the instance, so you're managing it through some sort of configuration management step, or you're managing it at your deployment level by changing the image name. So if I want Nginx, I have to know to pull foo/library/Nginx instead of just Nginx. So you're doing it either at deploy side or the configuration side. And I know to the point about Artifactory does allow it to, you could work in both ways. So I could actually, if I have Artifactory and I have a cache set up, I can just say pull Nginx, and Artifactory can actually know if my Artifactory endpoint is configured just like the other cache. It's like, oh, hey, yeah, we're going to pull it down through Artifactory. It doesn't actually host it at a separate project name. It's going to be the standard, Nginx namespace.
So Texan Raj asks, will ECR get all of these cool features of GoHarbor.io? That's a good question. And if you have specific features that you want to see in ECR, definitely reach out to any of us. Our Twitter handles are on the screen here. Tweet us, either DM or publicly is totally fine, and we'll pass that information along. But I'd love to hear use cases for what you're looking for and the specific features that you're seeing here that you'd like to see in ECR. I think that would be great.
And containers roadmap. I think it's just important to point that out. GitHub containers roadmap. There's a good chance whatever you're looking for, it may already exist on the roadmap, and that'll give you insight into how we're approaching it, or even if we're going to take on the work to implement that feature.
And W. Shari asks, how does search work for pass-through registries?
From the command line, or I'm trying to think how that's.
Yeah, that's actually W. Shari. Can you clarify a bit? Do you just mean the search bar at the top of Harbor, or do you mean like doing some kind of search from the command line? Oh, yeah, command line.
So I'm not sure how you search typically from the command line Docker Hub. A lot of the command line tools don't work on the main Docker search MPS image, like in the command.
I guess, yeah. Search the Docker Hub for images. Okay, so I think that's just going to be limited to registry.dockerhub.io or whatever their address is.
Right, that's hard coded, just like the endpoint registry for Docker Hub is hard coded.
Your music player, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I actually have never used Docker search. A lot of the command line tools that I've used are like Docker LS. Docker LS is a command line tool to list registries at a registry endpoint. A lot of these open source tools don't work with Docker Hub, which is probably why they built in search, because the API for the Docker Hub isn't a standard Docker image registry.
Okay, that's interesting.
Did I? Oh. Had it working.
So, Justin, for those of us who don't like to configure things in the UI, now, granted, the UI is beautiful. Like, I was actually very impressed with the UI, but I don't want people in there. I want people automating how they build these things. So is that possible? And how would I do that with Harbor?
Harbor has a Harbor YAML file for configuration when you run it locally. Inside of Kubernetes, that's all stored, I believe it was in a config map. So if I get config maps, I'll see configuration for different parts of Harbor. So Harbor registry. Adds, you can see configuration here for some of what that registry has, but I believe everything else, if I'm doing it through Helm, I can add a configuration file or do the set variables at install time. But I believe everything else is done through those config maps. You might need to restart it for some of those settings, but in general, it's done through config maps, which are essentially files that you store in Kubernetes. So it's a config file that just exists in the Kubernetes API.
Nice.
Perfect. Yeah, and even as and I love hearing his name said,
Right.
James freaking Carr. But a great line. I'm a command line commando, and it's true, right? Like it's always great to have a UI to just if you want to click around and see things, but we should be thinking about automating, not after it's built going in and clicking all the buttons and that's
for
error
for the actual like projects and user interface, there is an API for Harbor, so you can also configure everything through an API endpoint to say like, okay, I want to create all these repos or some sort of settings. That is available through the API.
Nice.
Awesome.
The last thing I wanted to show off here was what I called the library project, which allows you to do just like caching, but instead it allows you to sync. So it's a time-based sync for different images. So if I click on, I was syncing an Nginx image. Let's go back and actually just create a new one. If I remember how to do it now. Oh gosh, seriously. It's in a replication. Here's where we make the replication rules. And so we can say what we want to call this library. Let's call it BusyBox. Pull base.
Oh, so it can also replicate outbound with push base. Wait,
Yes.
Is that what that means?
Yes, you can also send it to other registries, so you can actually have.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So in this
So you
case,
can
I'm
do your
saying
builds locally, but use Docker Hub as sort of a as like a disaster recovery / backup kind of situation.
Right. And in this case, here, let's say I want all tags for BusyBox. I'm trying to remember if this is right. I only did this one once, but it's really nice that you can actually just do this. I'm going to do it manually, but you can do it as a scheduled job or event based. So I can have something else trigger this sync to happen, whether it's push or pull. Let's save it, see if it worked.
I think you had done push, which I may have messed you up by
You're
talking
right.
about that.
I did. Edit. Oh, I can't change that. Seriously.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. Let's try it one more time. Always. There you go. That makes sense. My source registry is there. Where I wanted to pull from is library, which is this. If you're not used to Docker, there's this. All the library images typically only have the same name. They default to library, but you have to specify it in a tool like this. BusyBox, and we'll say we want all of them. You can also do them. I know they're adding support, or it's supposed to have support for like Helm charts to come later. Namespace, and this is. Oh, I can do it blank. Let's try that one more time. BusyBox, say replicate. Oh, did that replicate the rule? Anyway, it's pulling it down now. So it shows it's in progress. It's, I have 147 tags to pull down because I said I'll pull down all of them. So it might take a little while to replicate all of those to my laptop now. But thankfully, BusyBox is pretty small.
Yeah, luckily.
So, and yeah, depending on the image, like it should share layers and all that sort of stuff just works out of the box. But in this case, now I have this library BusyBox image in my, inside of Harbor, and I can still pull it just like I would from anything from Harbor. But it's nice to be able to do these sort of scheduled releases, as well as distributions are a way to kind of replicate that out to different registries. Dragonfly is another one, which is a peer-to-peer based Docker registry, and Kraken, both of them CNCF. I think they're both CNCF projects. I believe they are. But you can replicate those out and say, hey, I need this in multiple data centers or multiple environments or something. You can create distributions that basically push out those images, which are a little different than replication, but it copies everything from one to the other.
Nice.
But I like the ability to sync, which was super handy in some cases where it's like, oh, I always want Nginx up to date, and I always forget to do a Docker pull first or something, so I can keep those in my registry.
That's really cool. That's handy. So Texan Raj asks, is Rothgar going to show us the install on EKS tomorrow, please?
I mean, a lot of that's going to depend on your environment, right? Like if I was in EKS and I had an ingress controller, almost nothing I did would be different. The main difference would be my endpoint here would be whatever my load balancer for my ingress controller. That's the only difference. And I might want to change some settings on replication or not replications, the storage to make it persistent, where I could say, hey, put this in an EBS volume rather than local disk. So there's some things you'll want to do to make it in a production quality environment. Use caching, use Postgres, use EBS volumes, but a lot of that configuration is in the settings of the Helm chart itself.
Now that you mention that, I believe I remember a question. I'm scrolling to find it again, where it was probably Tex and Raj that asked, do you recommend EFS as the backing store or S3? I can't find it.
It always depends. Right? I mean, the standard answer is depends. EFS would make sense in sort of, I mean, I guess both would make sense inside of a region.
Yeah, that's the thing that I was gonna mention.
Yeah, EBS volumes would be a little bit tricky because they're availability zone scoped, but EFS and S3 are going to be for the region. And so I would think that S3 will probably be a little bit cheaper, but might also be a little bit slower compared to EFS, but your mileage would vary depending on, how you're...
Yeah, and scale too. I think S3, I think S3 is a really safe bet from a lot of different angles, but
we're not saying EFS isn't safe.
Yeah, no, not at all. I didn't mean that, but I a safe bet. Like I just think your best bet is S3. It's
the thing is, we are storing objects, and so using an object store, if there's built-in ability to speak S3, that's probably going to be what I'm going to pick first. If there's no ability to speak directly to an object store and instead we have to talk file systems, that's when I start to look at EFS.
And on that note, I think it's time we have to wrap up.
It is. Yeah, we can't go over today.
Any like maybe 30 seconds, any parting words, Justin, on yeah, I mean, what do you want to say?
We're going to be off tomorrow. There's going to be a special show, but we'll be back on Wednesday, and Justin's going to be back, and we're going to look more at some command line tooling for, isn't that what you wanted to talk about? Command line tooling around registries and stuff like that. So
I'm going to dig into Docker Search because, like I said, I haven't used that, and that's probably the way to do it for Docker Hub images. But there's other tools to kind of look at images, inspect images, besides just using Docker command line. So I wanted to kind of show off some of those as far as what you can do.
All right, cool. Catch us Wednesday. See ya.